and welcome to everybody that's online. Thank you for joining us today. And we've been getting emails from around the country of people who's watching this online. And they are very interested in what we're saying and what's going on, and praise God. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, we are on page 174, right? All right. Always got to check. If you looked at my book, I got markings all over it from previous teachings using the book. And so I just want to make sure it's the right one, the right marks. All right. So bless the Lord. Welcome. Everybody have a good week? Could be better? Well, Nita and I got back, from Israel, and we're glad to be back. And yeah, I've already got 3 invites to go to Rwanda, India, and Nepal that officially came this week. So I sent them all emails about when I'd be available to go over there. So we'll see what happens. The east side of India was where the one invite was, so, and then Nepal right there at the Himalayas, and Rwanda. The country looks beautiful around Rwanda this time of year. The pictures I saw, so cool. And the interesting thing is the Nepal and India, June is the rainy season, but in Rwanda, June is the dry season. So I'm going to try to see if I can schedule to Rwanda in June, and then go to Nepal and India on the same trip in October, because that's their dry season is in October. I'm going to make sure I check the weather patterns before I say when and where I'm going to go over there. Right now, I looked at Rwanda right now. It's a rainy season in Rwanda, and it's raining every day. 50 to 70% chance of rain every day in Rwanda. So now's not the time of being Rwanda. so I'm excited about that. All right, so page 174 with chapter 82, verse 1. That's LXXXII, if you got Roman numerals you're looking at. So let's get started. And it says, "And now, my son Methuselah, all the things I am recounting to thee and writing down for thee, I have revealed to thee everything, and given thee books concerning all these. So preserve, my son Methuselah, the books from thy father's hand, and see that thou deliver them to the generations of the world." So according to this, the book of Enoch was given to Methuselah by Enoch, and had been carried on through generations we have today. So when people say, "Oh no, the book of Enoch is just pseudepigraphica," somebody wrote it in the name of Enoch, it doesn't make sense, because when you start studying the book of Enoch, you start realizing who could write something like this, and who can be right on the money on all this stuff. Especially when some people say it was written during the time of the Maccabees, some say it was written in the 1st century, but we see all kinds of things in the book of Enoch that shows that's not possible. So I truly believe it is it's probably one of the oldest books ever, and it just over time the translations or retranslations of things, because as you'll see tonight, we're talking about Enoch talked about when I learned to write. So he learned to write when he saw these visions of things and wrote them all down. So probably the angels were teaching him how to write. Verse 2, "I've given wisdom to thee and to thy children, and thy children shall be to thee, that they may give it to their children for generations, this wisdom, namely, that passes their thought." Verse 3, "And those who understand it shall not sleep, but shall listen with the ear, that they may learn this wisdom, and it shall please those that eat thereof better than good food." So reading the book of Enoch, according to Enoch, is better than eating food, because of the wisdom that's involved in it, right? Verse 4, blessed are all the righteous. Blessed are all those who walk in the way of righteousness and sin not as the sinners in the reckoning of all their days in which the sun traverses the heaven, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days with the heads of thousands of the order of the stars, together with the four which are intercalculated or callated, which divide the 4 portions of the year, which lead them and enter with them 4 days. So we're back to some of the information about the sun and the moon and the portals and the order in which everything operates. And the 4 portions of the year is talking about summer, winter, spring, and fall. Verse 5, owing to them men shall be at fault and not reckon them in the reckoning of the year. R.H. Charles, whose commentary we got here, says that should have been translating the whole reckoning of the whole world. Yea, men shall be at fault and not recognize them accurately. Verse 6, so they belong to the reckoning of the year and are truly recorded thereon forever, one in the first portal, and one in the third, and one in the fourth, and one in the sixth, and the year is completed in 364 days. Which is amazing because Enoch lived 365 years. It's like his life itself was representation of the calendar system. Verse 7, and the account thereof is accurate, and the recorded reckoning thereof exact. For the luminaries and the months and the festivals and the years and days has Uriel shown and revealed to me, to whom the Lord of the whole creation of the world has subjected the host of heaven. And he has power over night and day in the heaven to cause the light to give light to men, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the powers of the heaven which revolve in their circular chariots. So basically we've read some of this before, that angels are responsible to make sure all these luminary and heavenly hosts are in their orbits and doing their job as appointed. God has pointed angels over the sun, the moon, the stars, probably galaxies, everything. There's angels out there that's directing all this stuff and make sure nothing gets out of order. And you may think, well, why would it get out of order? Well, there's bad angels out there. And the bad angels will probably totally like to disrupt the orders of God in any way they can. So these angels are guarding and making sure everything stays in order and is patterned as God determined, which is for our benefit. Because even a lot of cosmologists will tell you that any major change, or basically any change in the cosmos, would have made a change on life being here on this earth. It's hard for me to explain, but they can explain it. Let's see, all the minerals we have, all the gases we have, all the elements we have are all because of the way the universe is organized. And he said if anything was out of whack, we'd be missing something on the earth. And it would be a terrible thing if iron wasn't created, if these elements weren't created that could actually stop life from existing upon the earth. What would we do if there wasn't any oxygen? Things like this, would be no life whatsoever. And they haven't found oxygen on any other planet. Why this planet? They have found helium, they have found all kinds of other gases, but they haven't found oxygen on any planet. That's an amazing feat right there. All right. 9. And these are the orders of the stars which set in their places and in their seasons and festivals and months. 10. And these are the names of those who lead them, who watch that they enter in at their time and in their orders, in their seasons, in their months, in their periods of dominion, and in their positions. 11. The 4 leaders who divide the 4 parts a year enter first, and after them the 12 leaders of the orders who divide the months, and for the 360 days there are heads over thousands who divide the days, and for the 4 intercalary days there are leaders which sunder the 4 parts of the year. And these heads over thousands are intercalated between leader and leader, each behind the station, but the leaders make the division. And these are the names of the leaders who divide the 4 parts of the year, which are ordained: Melchiel, Helemelech, Melejal, Narel, and the names of those who lead them: Adnarel, and Tajazuel, and Elomiel. These 3 follow the leaders of the orders, and there is one that follows the 3 leaders of the orders, which follow those leaders of the stations that divide the 4 parts of the year. Can you just imagine Enoch telling Methuselah all this stuff? He's going, what? Just write it down. What? Trying to explain these things to his son. Verse 15. In the beginning of the year, that would be, if it was a biblical calendar, that would be Nisan, Melchizedek rises first and rules, whose name is Tamini and son. And all the days of his dominion while he bears rule are 91 days. Now these 2 names, Tamini and son, in the Hebrew represent the southern sun. So these 2 names are one and the same. You could either call it Tamini or sun, and it represents the southern sun. So I thought this was very interesting that the different quarters of the sun has names. Now I don't know if this is the name of an angel that's over the southern time when it's hot or not, but verse 16 says, and these are the signs of the days which are to be seen on earth in the days of his dominion: sweat, heat, calms, and all the trees bear fruit, and the leaves are produced on all the trees, and the harvest of the wheat, and the rose flowers, and all the flowers which come forth in the field. But the trees of the winter season become withered. And these are the names of the leaders which are under them: Berkael, Zelebsel, and another who added a head of 1,000 called Hilu Jasaph. And in the days of dominion of this leader are in that end. So here they're talking about wintertime and summertime. They give names to the angels and the sun that is reckoned during those time of years. So again, we don't know the perspective Enoch was using on any of this, but it is interesting how all these names are being used. Verse 18, the next leader after him is Helemelech, whom one named the shining sun, and all the days of his light are 91 days. And these are the signs of his days on the earth: glowing heat and dryness. Trees ripen their fruits and produce all their fruits ripe and ready, and the sheep pair and become pregnant, and all the fruits of the earth are gathered in, and everything that is in the field and the winepress. These things take place in the days of his dominion. These are the names and the orders and the leaders of those heads of thousands: Ijal, Kiel, Hillel, and the name of the head of 1,000 which is added to them, Asphael, and the days of his dominion are at an end. So it is interesting how the seasons, Enoch gives names according to the seasons. Now whether or not these are names of individuals or just a name of the seasons, we don't know. But you can see that they're definitely talking about seasons here. And but all across the world, planet, in excavations and of cultures and past cities, mankind has been striving to figure out calendars for a long time. And they build monumental structures to try to hold fast what they think is a calendar, or their best calendar to keep track. And why do you think that they're so interested in the calendars and being able to count and know the seasons? Because it all depends on their growing seasons. When is it time to plant a seed? When is it time to harvest? You know, they don't necessarily just go by looks, because, you know, day by day things change day by day. It may rain, may snow another day. The You didn't expect it to snow. So they go by seasons. When a certain season shows up, they know it's time to plant. And the Bible's no different. Nisan is beginning of the Bible calendar, which is in the spring, and it all has to do with the barley. And so they begin the counting of that calendar when the barley is ripe in the green ear. So when the barley is ripe in the green ear, that immediately sets the calendar for the rest of the year. And so the Lord has seasons and times and places for the trees to produce fruit, and the agricultural, the wheat and the barley and all those things. So they have to be on schedule. Because when do you know when to plant? Because to plant the barley, you're not waiting for it to warm up outside. You're going to plant the barley when the season arrives. Because knowing full well that the season for the growth and the production of the barley is going to be on time. But you got to know when to start. And so we're the same way. Even here in the U.S., we're the same way. We watch the calendar. We know when it's a certain time to do things. The farmers today, they know when to plant the corn, when they plant all their crops, not according to what the way it is at that moment in the weather, but according to the calendar. The Farmer's Almanac is a classic case of that. And so they know that on this date I gotta plant this. On this date I gotta plant that. But Dad, it's snowing outside. I don't care. We're gonna plant this. We're gonna on these dates, because it always works out eventually for the growing season to be right on time. So if we didn't do anything except by the side of our eyes, we would have the calendars all messed up badly. Okay, well, I'm not going to go over the introductions of the next section, so you can certainly read that on your own if you haven't already. So we're going to go to page 182. Page 182. Now we get into the dream visions, which I think is a pretty awesome statements when we get into them here. So we're going to start with chapter 83, verse 1. And now, my son Methuselah, I will show thee all my visions which I have seen, recounting them before thee. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and one was quite unlike the other. The first when I was learning to write. The second before I took thy mother, when I saw a terrible vision, and regarded them, I prayed to the Lord. I had laid me down in the house of my grandfather Mahalel, when I saw in a vision how heaven collapsed and was borne off and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss. And the mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were rent from their stems, and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. So, excuse me, just in this alone, when the Bible, talks about, how it rained Noah's flood for 40 days and 40 nights. But also the fountains of the deep opened up. But it was also believed that the whole world at that time was covered with a water envelope. Just read in Genesis, and there was a firmament above and below. And a lot of Bible scholars say that there was a huge water envelope that surrounded the earth. And what caused Noah's flood was the collapse of that firmament. And we don't know what caused the collapse, whether it was just God telling it to collapse, or there was some other natural source like a comet or something that came. We don't know. It could have been, God can use anything to cause that to happen. But the water envelope collapsed. This is why the world at one time was a tropical paradise. This is why they find palm tree fossils and stuff like that up in Alaska and the rocks and everywhere else. Because when you got a water envelope around the world, it turns the whole world into a greenhouse. And everything is being watered by the humidity and the dew, by the water envelope around the earth. And so it collapsed, and the fountains of the deep opened up. I don't believe there's enough water in the fountains to have flooded the earth alone. It had to be a combination of the firmament that collapsed and the fountains of the deep opening up and flooding the earth. So basically what we're talking about here is Noah's flood. Verse 5, and thereupon a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up my voice to cry aloud and said, the earth is destroyed. And my grandfather Mahalalel waked me as I lay next to him. And he said unto me, why do thou cry so, my son, and why dost thou make such a lamentation? And I recounted to him the whole vision which I had seen. And he said unto me, a terrible thing hast thou seen, my son, and of a grave moment is thy dream vision as to the secrets of all the sin of the earth. It must sink into the abyss and be destroyed with a great destruction. So basically, Enoch's dream here is he saw the world destroyed by water, what we know as Noah's flood. Enoch saw it first. He saw it in a vision, and he was able to warn people about it. But it didn't occur right away. It waited till many years later after Enoch was ascended back into heaven again, and Noah came on the scene. And so Enoch saw all this in a vision. And it was a terrible vision to see the entire world flood. Because water is extremely destructive, very destructive. And so when it starts flowing from mountains and valleys, it'll tear everything up. And so he saw all this taking place. We see little tidbits here and there of hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff like that, and heavy deluge rains, all that. That's a tiny, tiny portion of the whole world being flooded. So this was a major destruction that Enoch saw here. Verse 8, and now, my son, arise and make petition to the Lord of glory, since thou art a believer, that a remnant may remain on the earth, and that he may not destroy the whole earth. So his dad is telling him, petition the Lord that a remnant will remain on the earth. Because obviously his father understood it too, because of the sins. It talked about the sins of the earth, that God was going to destroy the whole earth because of the sins of the earth. And how many people did God save on that Noah's flood? 8 people. He saved 8 people out of probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people on the earth at that time. He only saved 8. And I use this as an example all the time. When people try to justify whatever it is they believe in because others do too. And I have to remind them that, God only saved 8 people in Noah's flood. Do not ever think you're safe because of numbers. Just because everybody else is doing it, you're not safe. If God had to start over, he would start over. His word is sure and true, and judgment is true. Don't anybody ever think that just because you're in a majority, that's going to change God's mind or make you safe. Not so. Not so. And I've been told this so many times throughout the years, well, I'm just like everybody else, so got to wipe you all out. I actually had a member of a cultic church one time tell me, he says, well, 12 million people can't be wrong. Oh yeah. So yeah, numbers mean nothing to God. Because 12 million people can be deceived just as easy as 5 people. So there's no such thing as safe in numbers with the Lord. And there's no such thing as thinking that because you're in a large number of people, God will have extra mercy for you. Not so. Otherwise, he owes everybody in Noah's flood an apology, if that was the case. Okay. Verse 9, my son, from heaven all this will come upon the earth, and upon the earth there should be great destruction. Verse 10, after that I arose and prayed and implored and besought and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, and I will show everything to thee, my son Methuselah. And when I had gone forth below and seen the heaven and the sun rising in the east and the moon setting in the west, and a few stars on the whole earth, as everything as he had as had known in it the beginning, then I bless the Lord. So basically, he was just describing the day when he was writing all this stuff down. It was in the morning, the sun was rising in the east, and the moon was setting in the west. That's all it was really saying. And in the morning, I wrote all this stuff down. It would have been another way for him to say it, but he likes to be a little bit more poetic about it, I guess. I blessed the Lord of judgment, extolled him, because he made the sun to go forth from the windows of the east, and he ascended and rose on the face of the heaven, and set out and kept traversing the path shown to him. So just the sun's path rising in the east and setting in the west was an astonishment to Enoch, how that all even happened. Okay, we're in 84 now, verse 1, chapter 84, verse 1, page 184 if you got this book. And I lifted up my hands in righteousness and blessed the Holy One and Great One, and spoke the words with the breath of my mouth and with the tongue of flesh, which God had made for the children the flesh of men, that they should speak therewith. And he gave them breath and a tongue and a mouth, that they should speak therewith. Okay, let's just stop there for a moment. Enoch was Enoch. Had great faith in the Lord and great promise in the Lord. Are there people today like that? There are people today with great faith and great righteousness. So don't ever think that your prayers cannot avail something major. Here Enoch is trying to just save a remnant out of the whole earth, and God heard his prayers. But don't ever think that your prayers go unheard. Don't ever think that you don't have power in your prayers. You have power in your prayers too if you just believe. It's amazing. Verse 2, blessed be thou, O Lord King, great and mighty in thy greatness, the Lord of the whole creation of heaven, King of kings and the God of the whole world. And thy power and kingship and greatness abide forever and ever. And throughout all generations thy dominion, and all the heavens are thy throne forever, and whole earth thy footstool forever and ever. For thou hast made, thou hast ruled all things, and nothing is too hard for thee. Wisdom departs not from the place of thy throne, nor turns away from thy presence. And thou knowest and seest and hearest everything. There is nothing hid from thee, for thou seest everything. Now the angels of thy heavens are guilty of trespass, and upon the flesh of man abides thy wrath until the great day of judgment. And now, O God and Lord and great King, I implore and beseech thee to fulfill my prayer, to leave me a posterity on earth, and not to destroy all the flesh of man, and make the earth without inhabitant, so there should be an eternal destruction. And now, my Lord, destroy from the earth the flesh which has aroused thy wrath, but the flesh of the righteous and uprightness establish as a plant of the eternal seed, and hide not thy face from the prayer of thy servant, O Lord. That's a great prayer. Probably worthwhile studying that prayer. Do our prayers talk like that? When we talk to God, do we talk like that? And so he's very direct to what he's asking for. He's paying homage and worship to the Lord in his prayer. It's very important, the way we pray. Even Yeshua's taught us how to pray, and even that, what we call the Lord's Prayer for the disciples, has these elements in it. You know, the praise and worship and honor and all majesty and glory to the Lord, and then give forth your petition. You know, so this is a great prayer. It's worthwhile to read it several times, and then let your petition be known. So here Enoch is asking the Lord and all the earth to save a remnant, till the whole world has become corrupt. But he doesn't ask the Lord to save the corrupters. He knows the Lord wants to destroy the sinners out of the earth. So he says, you know, so now, my Lord, destroy the earth, the flesh which has aroused your wrath. So he's saying, go ahead, Lord, destroy the wicked. But the flesh of the righteous, establish a plant of eternal seed. That's kind of like the same kind of thing where Abraham was talking to the Lord that time about Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, said, would you destroy the righteous with the wicked? What if there were 50 righteous in that city? Would you spare the city? Same kind of type of prayer. And the Lord said, yeah, for 50 righteous, I'll spare the cities. And then Abraham, what about 45? Yeah, for 45, I'll not destroy the cities. What about 40? Yeah, if there's 40 righteous there, I won't destroy the cities. Lord, forgive me for being pushy, but how about 30? If there's 30, I won't destroy the city. And then he finally got down to 10. And at that point, Abraham knew he couldn't go any lower. He said, what about if there's 10 righteous, Lord? Will you spare the cities for their sake? And the Lord said, if there are 10 righteous, I will spare the cities for their sake. For just 10 righteous, he would spare the cities. But here, Enoch, the majority of people by far were so wicked that Enoch knew better to negotiate with the Lord. Said, what if there are 10 righteous? Will you not destroy the world? Although there was 8 that were put on the ark. But Enoch didn't wheel and deal with the Lord like Abraham did. But we're talking about a world versus a couple of cities. Big difference here. All right, 85. The second dream vision of Enoch, the history of the world to the founding of the Messianic kingdom. After this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up his voice and spoke to his son Methuselah. To thee, my son, will I speak. Hear my words. Incline thine ear to the dream vision of your father. Before I took thy mother Edna, so Enoch was married to a woman named Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth. Now you got to understand, this particular dream is using animals. So it's important to understand what animals mean. These certain animals mean in this dream. A bull is someone with authority. A cow usually indicates a female person. A heifer is a female virgin. Sheep, usually the people of God's promise. That's why when we read in the Bible, Israel is called the sheep many times, and those that follow the Messiah are called sheep too. But you're going to see another side of this, the colors. White, it typically means righteous. Red, not always, but a lot of times indicate bloody or martyrism. Black just flat means wicked. When you see that in there, that a black bull is usually a bad bull. And then you're also going to see animals, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. You're going to see carnivorous animals, wolves, hyenas, lions, all these things. They indicate Israel's enemies. You're going to see it through the whole history here. Then you're going to see birds. And the birds are ravens, the owls, the eagles. They indicate bad angels because they fly. They indicate bad angels. So you'll get real familiar with it as we go through. But this whole parable using animals is very, very interesting, as you're going to see. And let's see as we move along if you can figure out what person is being represented here by an animal, okay? So it says here, before I took your mother Edna, I saw a vision in my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth, and that bull was white, and and after it came forth a heifer. Along with this latter came forth 2 bulls, one of them black and the other red. And the black bull gored the red one and pursued him over the earth. Who are we talking about here? Anybody know? Adam and Eve, and the 2 sons, Cain and Abel. That's who we're talking about here. And thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. Who do you think the red bull was? Who's what? No? Abel. Remember what I said? Red typically means martyr or the shedding of blood. So Abel became known as a red bull because he was killed by the black bull, which indicated wickedness, Cain. Cain had killed Abel. But that, verse 5, but that black bull grew and the heifer went with him. The heifer, the first heifer is Eve. So you got to understand this is not talking about Eve. This is an important distinction to make here. The Bible says Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. And a lot of people, all they know about is Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Seth. And actually, that's not correct. Adam and Eve had a lot of sons and daughters. It tells you that they had sons and daughters. There's a famous movie out there, the Scopes Trial. Anybody ever seen that movie about the Scopes Trial? It was a lawsuit on Darwinism being taught. A Christian pastor filed suit that Darwinism shouldn't be taught. And he won that case actually, but it didn't matter. The schools kept on pushing evolution, even though he won the court case. And but in the movie they made, the attorney for the evolutionist people cornered the pastor and said, then, where'd everybody come from? Like if Cain killed Abel, who did they marry? Where were the women? How did they marry? And the pastor sat there and stuttered because it was a Hollywood script. He stuttered like he didn't know what he was talking about. Well, I don't know. The Bible, we don't know about that. But any Bible theologian will tell you the Bible says that Adam and Eve had a lot of sons and daughters. We also find in other extra biblical writings that when Cain was born, he had a twin sister. And when Abel was born, he had a twin sister. They were twins. So Cain took a liking to Abel's sister. And you can imagine the conflicts that started to rise there because Abel liked his sister. But Cain decided he liked. So they say that's probably one of the reasons why Cain killed Abel. It was a romance thing going on here. And but they married their sisters. That's where they got their wives. Now there was no prohibition against marrying your sister. The prohibition against marrying your sister didn't come until Mount Sinai. In the early years, the DNA was good in mankind. So you could intermarry and not have bad genes come into your offspring. But as man moved along and started developing broken genes and bad genes and all that, that God finally said, you can no longer marry your close relatives. Because if one's got bad genes, the other one's got bad genes, they could actually overcome the good genes and you have a mentally ill or handicapped baby. And that's how that works in layman terms. But it's so as mankind got older and older and older, and that's why you have laws today in countries, you cannot marry your immediate relatives because you're going to create mongoloids and mentally ill people. That's why you see a lot of this kind of sickness in communities that intermarry. There are communities out there, even here in the United States, there are communities that intermarry and they produce mongoloid children. And I've seen a lot of them from where I used to live. We used to have them knocking on our doors all the time looking for work. And they would just stand there and stare at you with a mouth down here and can't hardly talk. Just wanting to do anything, rake leaves, cut weeds, whatever. Because they're no good on any kind of better job. And that's as good as they got. Because they intermarried. But some people seem to think that they should be allowed to do that. The laws of Mount Sinai told you cannot. And they supersede what used to be. And so, but at that time, all the way up till Moses, it was very common practice to marry close relatives. Abraham married a close relative. Sarah was a close relative. So you see this a lot. But by the time the civilization moved on, got to Moses, the DNA structures became so corrupted that they could not allow that to happen anymore. So think about that. And you have a culture of people that was okay to intermarry with your relatives, and then comes along Moses and he gets the law of Mount Sinai, and the law comes out and says you can't do that anymore. Well, that had to be an amazing revelation to all the other cultures and civilizations on the earth at that time who still continued doing those kind of things. So, but God knew that practice had to stop because mankind's DNA was starting to become corrupted. And you're going to produce mentally ill or even physically handicapped children as a result of it. So somebody says, well, prove to me there's a God. That's one of the good arguments right there. Why did family intermarry used to be okay till we got to Mount Sinai? And God gave that law. Who knew at that point intermarry would be bad when it was a normal practice? God knew. That's one reason why there's a God.
What corrupted the genes?
What corrupted the genes? Probably sin. As sin more and more moved along, perhaps demonic possessions, all these kind of things, the genes begin to become corrupted. And pretty soon the DNA was not right anymore. And so God had to preserve. That's why it says in the Bible with Noah, he was perfect in all his generations, and he was saved. It didn't mean necessarily that he was absolutely perfect as a righteous man. He was, but that's not what that's referring to. It's referring to that he had the perfect DNA from Adam. And that DNA had to be preserved. And it was preserved through Abraham and continuing down. So when the Messiah came on the scene, he came from the seed of Adam. Perfect seed of Adam. That's why Messiah Yeshua was called the second Adam. Perfect seed. He was not corrupted at all, even in the lineage from Adam. So God was protecting that lineage all the way up to Yeshua. And so these things had to be. And a lot of the corrupted DNA could have been made by, like I said, demonic activity or even other fallen angels, and just slowly corrupted the DNA. Okay. All right. Verse 4, and that black bull gored the red one and pursued him all over the earth, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and the heifer went with him, and I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. So Cain had a lot of descendants, and were just like Cain. Had nothing to do with color or race. It all had to do with heart condition. Sin in the heart. This is what they mean by black bull and red bull or white bull. Had nothing to do with color of skin. So Cain, his seed began to also corrupt the earth also. So when the angels, fallen angels, came down, it was Cain's seed that they mostly messed with. That's why it had to be destroyed. The whole race of Cain was destroyed. So, believe it or not, you are descendants now. All of mankind on the earth are descendants from Noah. That's who you are descendants from, is Noah, not Cain. Cain and his seed were destroyed by the flood. So today we are all descendants of Noah. Huh? Which is the same thing as saying Adam, right? Yep. Verse 6, and that cow, the first one, which is now back to Eve, went from the presence of that first bull in order to seek the red one, but found him not, and lamented with the great lamentation over him in Sodom. So Eve, Adam's wife, was lamenting that Abel had disappeared. And she's roaming all over the place trying to find Abel, and was weeping and crying, what happened to my son Abel? And of course in the Bible we knew that Cain had killed him, and that his blood cries up from the ground. So, you know, that's always an amazing phrase to me, that their blood cries up from the ground. I think all it really means is that God is fully aware of who and what and how somebody died. And that blood is like a testimony against them. The blood don't really cry, but life of the flesh is in the blood. So it's always possible that the blood can tell a story. we see in, you know, investigative police work today that blood can tell a lot of stories. And and I looked until that first bull. Who was the first bull? Adam. Came to her and quieted her, and from that time onward she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls and black cows. So we see here that the other white bull that she bore, she gave birth to, was Seth. That was Seth. The next white bull was Seth. But again, Cain and Abel had twins. This is what I talked about. The heifer went with Cain. That was probably Abel's sister, or it could have been Cain's sister. We don't know, but it was his sister, relative anyway, that went with Cain. But Adam and Eve, even after that, begat many white bulls, which resembled them, following one the other, even many. So right there, it follows just what the Bible says. Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters. And Enoch says it too. Yeah, they did. 900 years to give a lot of children. Imagine how many children you can have in 900 years. Holy cow. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of children. My goodness. All right, so now we're in 86, verse 1. And again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above, and behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose and eat and pastured among those oxen. So remember what we'd already heard, that Cain created a lot of oxen, and now we see Adam and Eve created more animals also. So this star obviously is talking about a fallen angel. More than likely, based off other things that Enoch has said, that fallen angel, that particular one, is Azazel. Because, you know, Semjaza was one of the leaders of the fallen angels. It didn't really talk about Semjaza mating with the daughters of men, but it does tell you that Azazel did. So more than likely, Azazel is this star that fell. Because remember, the other angels were watching. When they saw them come down, then they joined. So they were like the leaders, Azazel, Semjaza. So more likely this is Azazel. And this is why I say in the last days, I think it's very probable that Azazel's coming back. And that he may actually be the beast of Revelation. Because he's not a good angel. A really very bad angel. Verse 2, and after that I saw the large and black oxen, and behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. This is one big swinging group. This is what it's talking about. They left their stalls, their appointed places they were supposed to be. When you're trying to use animals to tell a story, they left where they're supposed to be and began to mate with others out of their place. So this is like a huge orgy taking place on the earth, is what this is all about. Verse 3, and again I saw in a vision and looked toward the heavens, and behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to that first star. So the rest of the fallen angels saw what Azazel and Semjaza were doing, particularly Azazel, and they're all looking like, oh, he got away with it. Did you see what he did? Well, I want to be involved in that. And so here they come. Many other fallen angels came down. And they became bulls among those cattle. All right, so in other words, the stars transformed themselves into men. And we know that angels can do that. The Bible tells us the angels can do that. You know, when it says you've entertained angels unawares. The angels have the ability to transform into men. And they walk among us, and you don't always know there's an angel there. So this is why it's always important, you know, that like the Bible says, give to any man that asks you. You know, not only does, you know, God watching these kind of things, but you could be entertaining an angel and don't know it. That's why you want to show love no matter what, at all times. Verse 4, and I looked at them, and I saw, and behold, they all let out their privy members. This is their reproduction organs. They let them out. I'm surprised the translator only said privy members, but I think we all know what he's talking about. Like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen, and they became pregnant and bore elephants, camels, and asses. In other words, these fallen angels began to mate with the daughters of men and started producing, not men, strange creatures. Yes, sir.
Is that where the, what's it called?
Nephilim. Yeah, this is the Nephilim. And he started producing elephants, camels, and asses. In other words, I don't even know why they translated that as elephants, camels, and asses. More than likely, the actual words in the original probably didn't even say that. And it's very possible that later translations, people had no idea what those words meant. So they just put in elephants, camels, and asses.
They were different creatures, right?
Different creatures altogether, and some of them giants. And so, you know, what is an elephant? That's a pretty big critter. A camel's pretty big too. So they started producing unusual critters that we don't even know what the original words were that meant, that they got translated as elephants, camels, and asses. Verse 5, and all the oxen feared them and were frightened at them, and began to bite with their teeth and to devour and to gore with their horns. And they began moreover to devour those oxen. So the oxen began to fight back with their horns, but to no avail. These giants, you know, it could have been, some of them could have been as tall as 100 feet tall. You know, we know in the Bible were giants in the Bible maybe as tall as 14 feet. But there are claims out there, even in the world today, that they have uncovered a femur bone that was 20 feet long. A human femur bone that was 20 feet long, which would probably be equivalent to a man 60, 70 feet tall. There were some big giants. Big giants. And so, that verse 6, they begin to moreover devour those oxen. So these Nephilim that were created, these elephants, camels, and asses that were created, began to eat mankind and devour mankind. This is why violence began to fill the earth. You know, the cannibalism. We already saw the sexual orgies taking place. Now we're seeing cannibalism taking place. And these giants began to eat mankind, cannibals. So when it says violence filled the earth, they really mean violence filled the earth to the 10th degree that you can imagine taking place. And behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them and to flee from them. So these Nephilim, which is what we're talking about here, the elephants, camels, and asses, mankind had already begun to sin and do a lot of great evil in the sight of the Lord. And now, because of their evil, greater things begin to happen to them. Greater judgment began to happen to them, these Nephilim. You can imagine, even if you had just a 20-foot giant and he wanted to eat you, can you imagine the fear of mankind on the earth? And they're trying to gore them with their horns, and they're trying to fight back, but they can't fight back against these giants, so the giants started eating them. Because remember, we read earlier in Enoch that the Nephilim ate up all the acquisitions of men. We read that earlier. So all the food that man was growing for themselves, these giants ate it up. So there really was nothing left but to eat one another. The cannibalism. This kind of violence that filled the earth. So when people say, you ask them, what kind of violence you think it was? Well, there are probably people stealing. There's probably some raping going on. There might have been some killing. How about eating one another because there's no food left? That's a pretty nasty violence upon the earth. That's obviously what was happening here. And these Nephilim began to eat mankind. Wow. Nasty, huh? You can see how God was just getting so disgusted with what was going on. Okay, next part, 87, verse 1. Again I saw how they began to gore each other and to devour each other, and the earth began to cry aloud. And I raised mine eyes again to heaven, and I saw in the vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men. And 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. And those 3 that had come last come forth and grabbed me by the hand and took me up away from the generations of the earth and raised me to a lofty place. More than likely they raised Enoch to paradise. And showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And one said unto me, remain here till you see everything that befalls those elephants, camels, and asses, and the stars, and the oxen, and all of them. Okay, we'll take a break at this point. So, we're taking a break, Alan. Hello, hello, we are back. Okay. Page 189, we're on 88, verse 1. And I saw one of those four who had come forth first, and he seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep, and horrible and dark. And one of them drew a sword, and gave it to those elephants, and camels, and asses, and they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. So, a couple things right here. This angel, the first star, came, which, you know, they say was probably Raphael, and cast Azazel into a deep abyss that was narrow and deep and horrible and dark. Is this the bottomless pit? Possibly. Because where does the beast of Revelation come out of? The bottomless pit. So it's very possible that Azazel will be the beast of Revelation. And then he went on to say that they gave a sword to the elephants, camels, and asses. All that is indicating that they gave them the means to kill each other off. And so they began to fight, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And as I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of those four who had come forth stoned them from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars, whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them hand and foot, and cast them into an abyss of the earth. So all the rest of those angels that came down and began to mate with the daughters of men were also cast into an abyss of the earth. Don't know whether it was the same abyss or not. It doesn't tell you that. Could have been the same abyss. It could have also been a bottomless pit also. We don't know. But in Revelation, when the bottomless pit opens up, all kinds of nasty stuff comes out of it. So there's more than just Azazel in there. There's probably what Abaddon, which is probably Azazel. Apollyon, which is another way to say it, is probably Azazel. He comes out. This is why the beast of Revelation, when it says that who can make war against the beast? No one. This creature comes forth, he cannot be killed. You can't kill an angel. Only God can kill an angel. But mankind cannot kill this angel. So if it is Azazel, when he comes forth, he's a mean angel. That's why I've said many times. He's not going to come out and deceive the world in the sense that, you know, he's going to be the leader of the UN or the EU in a three-piece suit and anything like that. That ain't going to happen. He's a bad dude. And he would show up immediately and begin to operate like though he's God and doing miracles immediately and deceiving the world. He does deceive, but you're going to see it through his actions and his miracles that he does. And people are going to actually think he's God. But they thought he was God when he came the first time to the earth. What was that, Jim?
Will he look human?
It's very possible he could take on human form. You know, any of these angels can take on human form. So he could look human, but his action and his fruit is what we got to watch. You know, he may not show up looking like a scary seraphim or a cherubim or anything like that, a cherubim, but we got to watch his fruit. If he starts calling fire down from heaven, and he starts organizing, you know, armies to come against Israel and all this kind of stuff, bad guy, bad guy. The Messiah would never do that. Because that's a good question, Dora, but why are some Christians going to be deceived by him? Because Christians don't know the Word of God, and they're going to see the wonders that this guy does, and the great boasting words that he speaks. And Daniel actually says he will speak with flattering words and deceiving words. So he will deceive, but he's not going to be like some leader of some organization that all of a sudden acts normal, that all of a sudden springs forth and find out he's the bad guy. He'll be a bad guy from the beginning, but the world will not know it. And he will show up. and do all kinds of terrible things. He'll work his magic, as Daniel says. And so he will deceive the world, and many will receive the mark of the beast as a result. Speaking of the beast of Revelation, you need to understand a couple of concepts. There's the beast of Revelation speaking as the beast of nations, and then there's the individual that's the beast. So when you read in the book of Revelation about the seven-headed beast and all that kind of stuff, that's symbolism of nations that represent the beast. The seven-headed creature in Revelation is not the beast, but it's representation of the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Assyrian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Muslim Empire, all these different empires that will form again one coalition. That's also called the beast. But out of that coalition comes the little horn, which will be the actual individual, the beast. So you have to be careful how you read Revelation, because you'll get confused up when you're talking about the coalition beast versus the individual that's a beast, which is also known as the little horn that comes out of the seventh head. So you have to watch the situation take place. But I believe it's probably, I feel like it's Azazel, but there's no way I can prove it. Other than Azazel appears to be thrown in the bottomless pit, and this guy comes out of the bottomless pit. He's not human. No human lives in the bottomless pit. He's not human. He could take on the form of a human, but he himself is not human. So that's why I always laugh about everybody trying to find out who the Antichrist is, you know. Oh, it's Prince Charles, you know. Oh, it's that leader in Spain. Oh, it was Hitler. Those were humans. They have records of being born. They bleed like any other human. They died like any other human. They were bad guys, but they were not the beast. You cannot kill the beast. All the other bad guys could be killed or are already dead. You cannot kill the beast. The Messiah himself kills him. So, but there's a good chance that, like you were saying, he will take on the form of a man. And then when the Messiah comes after him, that when the Messiah kills him, that fleshly form of a man, dead body may remain, and then the Messiah takes his spirit and throws it in the lake of fire. Because it tells you too that the body of that creature will be thrown into Sheol, and Sheol throws it back. They don't even want it. So these are difficult things to comprehend, but you kind of put it all together and you try to create a scenario. Now wait a minute, if he's not a man, why was his body thrown into Sheol? And you say, well, is it because he took on the form of the man, and that's what we see dying is the form of a man? But as his spirit comes out of there, which could be Azazel, the Lord takes that and throws it into the lake of fire. So much we don't know. All we can do is speculate about a lot of this stuff. Alrighty. All right, the punishment of the fallen angels, we talked about grabbing that first star, and of course the stars are angels. Here in Enoch, when it talks about a star, it's talking about angels. And it was bounded and cast into abyss. And in verse 2, a sword was given to the elephants, camels, and asses, the Nephilim. So the Nephilim began to kill each other off. Verse 3, and as I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of the four who had come forth stoned them from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars, whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them into the abyss of the earth. We had read that earlier, but it's worth reading again. So all the fallen angels will be bound to and cast into an abyss. And as we read earlier in Enoch, it told us that all these fallen angels will come back, beginning in the lands of the Medes and Persians. It actually tells you that's where they come back to, the land of the Medes and Persians. Well, that's the area of the old Assyrian Empire. And what does Isaiah call the bad guy of the last days? The Assyrian. He comes out of that area. Ezekiel calls him Gog of Magog. Where's Magog? Same area. You know, Daniel calls him king of the fierce countenance, but doesn't really tell you what area he comes from. But that's why that whole area up there in western Turkey, northern Iran, northern Iraq, Armenia, Georgia, that whole area just around those Caucasus Mountain areas is where it's all going to happen. That's where he's coming from. So when you're watching world news, pay close attention. I've been paying real close attention to the Turkish president lately because he's in that area. Ankara, the capital of Turkey, is in eastern Turkey in that area. So when you start talking about putting an army, Islamic army together to attack Israel, he is speaking just like the Assyrian or Gog would speak. Now, I don't think he's the guy, but watch him. He could open the door for the guy. And I do believe that this beast, when he comes, will turn around and tell the world that he is the 12th Imam or the Islamic Mahdi. So just like that, he'll have 1.4 billion people, man army at his fingertips. And if you ever talk to a Muslim person, just ask him, will you do anything the Mahdi tells you to do? Oh, absolutely, he's the Mahdi. And we've asked those kind of questions. That, well, so if he says kill the infidels, you're going to kill me? Well, then they kind of beat around the bush, you know. But yeah, of course they would. They just don't want to tell you at your face. So when the Mahdi shows up, the 1.4 billion Muslims will go to war. All the nations that are listed in Ezekiel, Psalms 83, are all Islamic nations and enemies of Israel today. What a perfect scenario for him to show up and rule. So he will show up, declare himself the Muslim Messiah, the 12th Imam, and do miracles and convince them so, and he'll have this huge army at his fingertips immediately. And somewhere in that process, the two witnesses will show up and counter him. He doesn't like it. God protects the two witnesses, and these two witnesses cause him great harm for quite some time, till God pulls his covering away from the two witnesses. And then, as soon as God pulls the covering away from the two witnesses, the beast will kill them. Right now. He couldn't kill them before. But as soon as he realizes that the protection of God is not on them anymore, he will kill them. And their body lies in the streets of Jerusalem for several days. These two witnesses. So you think about, you know, the theory, and I think it's a legitimate theory, that the two witnesses, who are they? Well, probably Enoch and Elijah, two men that have not died. Because it says, every man is appointed to die once. Enoch and Elijah never died. So it makes sense, in order for God's word to be fulfilled, that they'll be the guys that show up and will be killed. So, of course, then, you know, that theologically we can start getting a little messy with this. When the rapture occurs for those that are alive, they never taste death either. How do you explain all that? You know, so theologically you could get off of the deep end here on the whole idea of appointed man to die once. You could also say, well, when they change from body from corruptible to incorruptible, it's possible that the corruptible body will fall and they rise with a new body like that. So in a sense they did die. So, but that's all speculation and theory that can try to rationalize using the scriptures. But I do believe it's Enoch and Elijah because they have not died. And actually, it says in Malachi, Elijah will come back in a great, terrible day of the Lord, and he will turn the hearts of the children to the fathers and the hearts of the fathers to the children. Elijah will do that. So Elijah, who was caught up into heaven in the fiery chariot, definitely is coming back because Malachi the prophet spoke about it. So it makes sense that Enoch, who was declared a witness for the Lord, will be one of them too. Because it does say that, some people say, well, it'd be Moses. But the Bible said Moses died. Yeah, and he was buried, and God buried him. So Moses died. He fulfilled the die once command. But there are two people that have not died, Enoch and Elijah. So I believe it's those two are the two witnesses. They are coming back. What's that? What better two witnesses? That's correct. Great witnesses. Okay. All right, where were we at here? It's on the visions. What's that? 190, top of 190? And one of those four went to that white bull and instructed him in a secret, without his being terrified. He was born a bull and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel and dwelt thereon. What bull is that? Noah. Noah, yes, it's Noah. And 3 bulls dwelt with him in that vessel, and they were covered in. What 3 bulls would that be? His sons. Yeah, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, the 3 sons. They're called 3 bulls here. And verse 2, and again I raised mine eyes toward the heavens, and I saw a lofty roof with 7 water torrents thereon, and those torrents flowed with much water unto an enclosure. And I saw again, and behold, fountains were opened on the surface of that great enclosure, and that water began to swell and rise upon the surface. And I saw that enclosure till all the surface was covered with water. The enclosure was the earth itself. So Noah's flood just came. And the water, the darkness, and the mist increased upon it. And as I looked at the height of that water had risen above the height of that enclosure, and was streaming over that enclosure, and it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle of that enclosure were gathered together, till I saw how they sank, and were swallowed up, and perished in that water. But that vessel floated on the water, while all the oxen, elephants, camels, and asses sank to the bottom. They died and were covered with water. That's why we have petrified bones today. The ancient human being bones they find today are these people. These petrified bones we find today are those people that were covered in Noah's flood. Verse 7, again I saw in that vision till those water torrents were removed from that high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and other abysses were opened. And the water began to run down these till the earth became visible. All right, so let's talk about that for a moment. What caused the earth to become visible again? You got the whole world covered with water, no land visible. Now think about the doves being sent out and everything else, and the ravens and everything else. Finally the dove came back with an olive branch. It meant somewhere, some place, there was a tree growing. The land was exposed. So how did you, if the firmament above collapsed and the fountains of the deep opened up and you flooded the earth, you could say, well, the Lord reopened those fountains and the water drained back in them, but that did not allow for the firmament that collapsed on the earth. How do you deal with that water? You either recreate a firmament or you have to do something different. And what I just said there was other abysses were opened. So what the Lord did was created giant trenches in the ocean. It'd be the same thing if you were at a beach, at an ocean, and you took your hands on the sand and you started pushing together like this. In the center, the earth rises up. And if you were doing that in a small pond, water will begin to fill the abysses you just made with your hands in the sand and will recede. So that's how the water on the earth receded, was God caused it to drain deeper in the earth by creating abysses. The Mariana Trench by Japan's a huge abyss. God created all those things to drain the water back into, so the earth would be exposed again. That's how that happened. Yeah, so explain that to your kids, okay? When you, what's that? Well, obviously God caused it because somehow or another the seeds that were floating around, got covered up, and when God was ready to germinate the seeds, he caused them to germinate fast. And they did germinate fast. So the seeds didn't die. The seeds, they stayed dormant, and the seeds came back and began to cover the earth again in God's speed. So you think about a seed from an olive, and within a year a dove came back with an olive branch. That was a fast-growing olive tree. But God was accelerating things to get the world green again. So, but that's what it tells you right here, that these abysses were open. In other words, like God himself reached down in the ocean and started readjusting the land and creating trenches for the water to drain back into. And when he would do that, the water would drain back pretty fast when he started doing that. Wasn't through evaporation. I've heard people teach that. All evaporated. Where did it evaporate to? Well, it just evaporated. The air is already saturated with moisture. You can only get so much moisture in the air. That's physics. You can only saturate the air so much. So where did the water go to? It wasn't by evaporation. God caused it to fill the trenches. And that's why the water receded off the land. Interesting stuff. Verse 8, and the water began to run down into these till the earth became visible, but that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. Verse 9, but that white bull which had become a man came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him, and one of those 3 was white. Which son of Noah do you think was the white bull? Shem, yes. And one of them was red as blood. That would be Japheth. And one was black. That would be Ham. And the white bull departed from them. And that means Shem departed from the others. Moved away. So I guess we're going to have to stop right there. We'll pick it up 191 next week. Let me see what the reading assignment ought to be. All right. Let's go from 191 to 204 to chapter 90. And we'll continue on with the animals and the sheep and the history of the world, basically, as we continue on with this. And it's kind of fun because as we go through it, see if you can identify all the major players as we go through it.
How does the 3 bulls turn?
We're done.